Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Board of Managers from Minnehaha Creek Watershed District for August 10th to order. All managers are present with the exception of Sherry White and Dick Miller. Manager Hejmati will join us shortly. Are there anybody here wishing to address the board on issues not on the agenda or on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move ahead with approval of the agenda. A motion. So moved. We have a motion from Jean Maxwell to approve the agenda. Do you have a second? Second. Thank you, Steve Sand. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, agenda is approved. Next up is the consent agenda. We do have informational items there that ahead of the consent agenda that are available if anybody is interested in going through that. The consent agenda is approval of the July 27 board meeting minutes. Resolution 23-042, authorization to renew Elements Excess Annual License. And resolution 23-041, approval classification, approved classification and compensation study. Do I have a motion to approve the consent items? So moved. We have a motion from Manager Hejmati. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jessica. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we'll move ahead with the regular board committee and task force reports. I do not have a president's report tonight. So I'll go with Jessica Loftus on her Operation and Programs Committee meeting.
Thank you. All of our managers were at the committee meeting this evening. However, just for an update for the public, got an opportunity to welcome a new employee, Sophia, and we got an update from Mr. Heyman on project planning. He gave us 4 project updates. First on East Auburn wetland restoration, which is in the planning and feasibility analysis and is working towards design in 2024. The second project is the Long Lake Creek County Road 6 pond retrofit. We received a feasibility update on that project. Third was the Greenway to Cedar Trail connection. Currently working on agreements with design targeted for 2024 and construction the following year. And then lastly, the Minnehaha Parkway stormwater management in Minneapolis. Currently working on partnership development and work plans with the steering committee. And the design for that is a little bit further out, but in 24 and 2025. And that concluded our meeting.
Thank you. The upcoming meeting events are on the schedule, and we do have a citizen advisory committee meeting coming up September 20th, and Manager Santa will be representing the board at that meeting. There are no public hearings tonight, so we will go to item number 10, which is permits requiring variance or discussion. We'll be reviewing permit 23071, which is the MediaCom variance review at 1948 Wayzata Boulevard in Long Lake. Maria.
Thank you, Manager Olson. Let me just get this pulled up. Sorry, I had to make sure that was turned on. Okay. Good evening, Chair Olson and Board of Managers. Tonight I will be providing a briefing on permit 23-71, the MediaCom project located at 1948 Wayzata Boulevard, west in the city of Long Lake. The applicant is seeking a variance from the water body crossings and structures rule because they are not able to meet the minimum setback requirement of 100 feet from channel bank for one bore pit location involving directional drilling. Mr. Tom Heimo is here on behalf of MediaCom and can assist in answering questions if needed during the discussion portion at the end of my presentation. This presentation will provide an overview of the project, including the project location and proposed work, as well as rule compliance and the variance request. The presentation will end with time for questions and discussion before board deliberation. The yellow dot or icon on the map is a project location in relation to the entire district, circled here. As you can see, the project sits within the Long Lake Creek subwatershed. This map shows a close-up of the project area, again highlighted with the yellow icon. The project is just east of the downtown area of Long Lake and north of County Highway 12. East of the project site is Long Lake, as well as a stormwater basin system, as you can see indicated within the red box and the yellow boxes. This stormwater basin system is maintained by the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. This map shows a little bit of a closer aerial view of the local area and how water moves through the channel that runs along the project site. Upstream of the project area is a drainage system or route along Highway 12. From this area, the water moves north under Highway 12, under Brown Road North, and under Wayzata Boulevard West through a system of culverts. From Wayzata Boulevard West, the channel runs through the project site and into the stormwater basin system before discharging into Long Lake. The applicant was previously leasing a utility pole owned by Xcel Energy that has been removed. The existing internet fiber cable had been attached to Xcel Energy's pole and was connected aerially to the existing utility pole on the north side of the building at 1916 Wayzata Boulevard West. Because the utility pole was removed, the fiber cable is currently lying exposed on the ground and over the channel. Therefore, the applicant proposes to install 290 linear feet of 1.5-inch PVC interduct within the same utility easement using directional boring to replace the fiber cable that is currently lying on the ground. 67 feet of this duct will be located beneath the channel and will connect the fiber cable to the existing utility pole. Now that we've looked at the project's location within the district and the proposed work at the site, I will review the district rules triggered and how the proposed project meets their requirements. For the rule analysis, staff have reviewed the permit application and determined that the proposed project triggers the district's water body crossings and structures rule. The permit has been reviewed in accordance with the criterion of the rule. The water body crossings and structures rule is applicable to projects that propose to place a road, utility, bridge, boardwalk, or associated structure in contact with the bed or bank of a water body. This includes horizontal or directional drilling and the installation or replacement of a pipe or culvert. This project triggers the water body crossings and structures rule because a utility is to be installed underneath a channel with defined banks, thus meeting the definition of a district watercourse. The applicant's proposed work will not affect water quality, hydraulic capacity, or wildlife passage capabilities, as the applicant is not proposing to work within or disturb the bed or banks of the channel. The applicant has provided at least 3 feet of separation between the bottom of the channel bed and the top of the duct in their plans, and the applicant's proposed work meets the requirements and criteria of the water body crossings and structures rule, with the exception of one requirement, section 3G. Based on review of the submitted plans, the applicant is not able to meet the required 100-foot setback from water bodies for one directional drilling bore pit. The applicant has requested the board consider granting a variance to the water body crossings and structures rule, section 3G, which requires a minimum 100-foot setback from water bodies for directional drilling holes. The purpose of this requirement is to place bore pits far away from any watercourse banks to prevent erosion, sedimentation, and impact from the fluid used to route the directional drilling pipes, ducts, or lines. The bore pit located west of the channel cannot be moved closer to the 100-foot setback requirement due to spatial constraints. These constraints are due to existing utility infrastructure located on the property for the applicant, which are the existing handhole or at-grade vault located at Wayzata Boulevard West, here in the red circle, and the existing utility pole located north of the building at 1916 Wayzata Boulevard West, both of which the fiber cable needs to connect to. The other site constraint is a senior living apartment building being constructed at the property of 1948 Wayzata Boulevard West. If you aren't aware of this, this is the Zavago Long Lake senior apartment building. The applicant is proposing to install the fiber cable within existing utility easements, which will require a bore pit to be located 33 feet from the channel. The applicant has proposed to install redundant silt fence as erosion and sediment control measures to mitigate any risk of erosion or sediment movement from the proposed bore pit. We've now reviewed the geography of the project area as well as the district rules that are triggered. In this next section of the presentation, I will be reviewing the applicant's variance request. The variance and exceptions rule allows the Board of Managers to hear requests for variances from strict compliance with provisions of the district rules if the board determines that the request meets 5 criteria. Each variance criterion is analyzed in the following slides. The first criterion asks the applicant to prove that due to special conditions inherent to the property, strict compliance with the rules results in hardship. The applicant states that the position and alignment of the western proposed bore pit site represents a special condition, and moving the bore pit to the required 100-foot setback would cause undue hardship. The fiber cable was previously connected airily from the existing utility handhole or at-grade vault at Wayzata Boulevard, again located in this area, to the utility pole north of the building at 1916 Wayzata Boulevard West by an Xcel Energy owned utility pole located at the property of 1948 Wayzata Boulevard West, where this proposed bore pit is. The handhole and pole are within utility easements, and moving the existing utilities would require the applicant to establish another easement real estate. In addition, a senior living apartment building, that shows the infrastructure and how it was routed. In addition, a senior living apartment building is being constructed on the property of 1948 Wayzata Boulevard West. The building footprint restricts the distance of the proposed bore pit on the west side of the channel. The second criterion asks the applicant to prove that the hardship was not created by the landowner or the applicant themselves. The applicant has proposed to install the fiber cable underground because a utility pole that the applicant was leasing from Xcel Energy was removed. This removal was out of the applicant's control. The applicant is proposing to install the fiber cable using directional boring and have entrance and exit holes on either side of the channel in order to pass below. Due to the building being constructed at 1948 Wayzata Boulevard West, the existing layout of utility easements, and the need to connect the fiber cable to an existing utility pole located north of the property at 1916 Wayzata Boulevard West, again located here, the applicant is not able to meet the required setbacks for the proposed bore pit. The third criterion asks the applicant to prove that granting the variance will not just serve as a convenience to them and for the project. Because a utility pole was removed that the applicant was leasing, and the utility pole was here, circled in red, the existing fiber cable is laying on the ground and across the channel from the existing handhole or at-grade vault to where the utility pole was located and to the existing utility pole. The need to find a sustainable location for this utility is not merely a convenience to the applicant. The fourth criterion asks the applicant to prove that there is no feasible or prudent alternative to the activity requiring the variance. The applicant has explored alternative options for this location. The first alternative option is to construct a utility pole on the west side of the channel to have the fiber cable cross airily. Constructing a utility pole would have potential channel impacts if the pole were to fall into the stream or become damaged and would require ongoing future maintenance. In addition, utility poles require minimum setback distances from building structures. To construct or install a utility pole on the west side of the channel within the existing utility easement that is set back far enough from the apartment building and not within the channel would place the pole on the east side of the channel. In addition, the applicant leases utility poles and does not put up their own structures. If an existing utility pole is an option, the applicant will pay a rental fee to lease the pole. If there are limited or no utility poles available, the applicant will install their infrastructure underground. The second alternative is to leave the fiber cable at ground level and crossing the stream. This would leave the cable at risk of being damaged or potentially falling into the channel. The third alternative explored is to alternately route the fiber cable, and tie it into the existing utility pole from the south side of the building while still avoiding crossing the channel. As you may have seen from the alternative route maps included in the board packet, these routes would require additional linear feet of cable and excavation or work areas in order to route the cable and duct away from the channel and avoid crossing it while still connecting it to the south side of the building. In addition, the applicant would need to avoid excavating within or along Wayzata Boulevard West, as it would be contrary to the special provisions condition listed on the applicant's right-of-way utility permit from Hennepin County. Because Wayzata Boulevard West was reconstructed within the last 5 years, no excavations or land disturbance are allowed within the roadway, curb and gutter, or sidewalk areas. If the applicant were to route the fiber cable on the west and south side of the building, still within close proximity, the applicant would still need to cross the channel. The fifth criterion asks the applicant to prove that granting the variance will not be contrary to the intent of the water body crossings and structures rule. The applicant has cited that no work will be done within the bed or bank of the channel, and a clearance of 3 feet beneath the bed of the channel has been cited on the applicant's work plans. The ecological integrity of the channel will not change from existing to post-construction conditions. Both bore pits will be set back from the channel top of bank. The proposed bore pit located east of the channel will be more than 100 feet from the channel banks, and the proposed bore pit located west of the channel will be approximately 33 feet from the channel top of bank. Neither bore pit will be placed within the bed or banks of the channel. Redundant silt fence has been cited on the applicant's work plans and will be used at both bore pit locations on either side of the channel. The use of multiple erosion control best management practices will minimize any construction impact to the channel and prevent any erosion or sediment movement at the bore pit locations. In summary, the applicant has applied for Minnehaha Creek Watershed District permit for water body crossings and structures and a variance to providing a required minimum setback of 100 feet for one bore pit location. Staff is recommending approval contingent on the board's approval of the variance because staff found all other requirements to have been met. Staff finds the variance arguments to be sound, accurate, and have justification, and on that basis, pass on the variance to the board for their judgment and for their review of the variance. Thank you, Chair Olson and Board of Managers, for listening to this briefing on permit 23-71 and the applicant's variance request. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them now.
Before we do that, I'd like to know, is there a motion to approve the permit 23071? So. Okay, well,
How about it?
all right, we'll have Manager Hijmati.
Manager for Chair Olson, general practice is for the board to consider action of the variance within the first second. And I believe legal counsel is just maybe copying on to say the same thing.
Thank you. So we will take a motion on the variance first from Manager Hijmati. Second by Manager Maxwell. All right, any discussion on the variance?
Thanks. I had one question. You touched on it a little bit, but I understand Excel took the utility pole down, but why not erect their own pole in the same spot?
Thank you, Manager Loftus. In terms of the applicant constructing a pole in the same spot,
Yeah, like in kind, same spot.
it was from this permit, it was assumed that Xcel Energy took down their utility pole due to the building going up at 1948 Wayzata Boulevard West. And because the applicant was leasing that utility pole, as I kind of mentioned in my presentation, they do not generally construct their own infrastructure, their own utility poles. As long as something is there and existing, they will use that. Their preference is if nothing is there, or if it's not able to be routed underground. So putting up a pole that would potentially have to be taken down in the future anyways, or trying to meet that, the setbacks from the city, having a pole so close to the part of the apartment building, but also developing any real estate for utility easement in that area would be difficult.
So we know that Excel had to take that pole down. They were told to take it down.
I'm not positive they were told to take it down. That's what we are, that's what I am. That's what I believe they had to, that's why they had to take it down. But they were, Excel Energy has the ability to route their infrastructure or their connections from other locations to that other existing utility pole behind 1916 Wayzata Boulevard West.
Would your meeting representative maybe want to clarify?
For that photo.
Yep.
So, this might help clarify a little bit. So this is the building
Mhm.
and this is the creek here. This is the drop down going. They barely have enough room to fit their equipment on that flat space.
Mhm.
So if they're trying to get vehicles in there to place a pole, they're gonna be running for the creek and everything else, trying to get it in.
So the pole wasn't in a utility easement?
It was, a building sitting there.
They were allowed to construct a building that close to it. Here,
Apparently you guys approved it.
we did, but yeah,
Well, the last couple things I got was they would have had to apply for a variance themselves and would have had to go for you, but
I don't know if we've seen anything. I don't know.
that's what I was kind of told, but,
Okay, I'm just trying to understand, like a new development comes, it doesn't usually typically force utilities to make large changes. Usually some in-kind rights, but
depending on what it is, I've
yeah,
run across, I've only been doing this for a couple of years now, and I've had several where they gone through and they got our stuff and I didn't want to move it, but yeah, there isn't a whole lot of space there.
yeah, it's hard to see where the lines are and whatnot, but yeah. I can see a building under construction.
I would think that was gonna be all underground. Service utilities.
On the other side of the creek towards the building.
So when did they lay your cable on the ground?
About a year ago, a little over a year ago.
Like a year ago.
Yeah. So Excel came in, took out their pole, laid it on the ground, didn't say anything to us. And the guy that had the area before me put together the project to get the stuff buried. And then I took it over. And then they came up, we had applied for this permit to you guys. And then it's been one thing after another trying to get it, so.
And you're the only displaced utility, everyone else is. figured out.
Excel, from what I gathered, they were able to redirect their stuff on their poles elsewhere
Mhm.
and just terminate and then abandon that area. But we have to go through there. We don't have another option.
Because. of
The-
Why,
We can't go across the road because of the moratorium. We
because
got
it's a new construction,
Right,
yeah.
we've got to get across that creek somehow. So that. we
and there's
can-
no other overhead option, for
There's no-
pole somewhere else.
No,
Further down the utilities.
no, and major trunk for us that provides communications to Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota. And has businesses on there, has cell towers on there as well as.
Yeah, I agree, you probably have a need for this utility, I'm just trying to understand that there weren't other options that didn't include boring under the creek. That's all. I'm just trying to
Maybe
clarify that.
you want to grab us to see while the board asks questions.
Yeah.
I think that information manager office has been somewhat elusive. That's what I've been grilling Maria on for like the better part of the last week. It's like, it's
Sorry.
no, I think that there's a variance application in terms of the directional drilling. There is minimal risk to the creek, but in terms of a hardship, the number one thing that we want to ask is like, why can't you just put a pole up?
Yeah,
And
maybe not in that same location, but a
But
different location.
in terms of, I
It
think
seems like there are no other viable options.
it does seem like that, and I think staff's variance analysis on something like this is tempered by the fact that there is minimal risk to the natural resource, and in general, having the utility undergrounded is
Better.
a potentially more sustainable solution than having to go back into the area in the future and do disturbance if there's a pole moving or clearance or that sort of thing.
Well,
So in general, it's low risk, but I think that is something that we've been asking the applicant.
But it begs the question of coordination as well.
Yep.
Are there other utilities and is it one boring, one pipe under the creek versus multiple?
Mhm.
And if you were the only displaced utility in that area because of this new build, I agree, there isn't enough coordination. You not getting notice from Excel isn't shocking. They're not in charge of your utility, right? So I just ask because we don't want 10 different borings under this creek.
Right.
Well,
So
thank you.
that's the only reason I ask.
Oh, thank you, Manager Loftus. That, yeah, it's something definitely I've been keeping in mind, and have confirmed with the applicant that the applicant, Medicom and Excel were the only two utilities on that pole.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
The redundant silt fence, is that our rule or is that their idea?
It is, thank you, Manager Olson. It is part of our rule to have some sort of mitigation with erosion control measures is a great way to do that. That is within our rule. It was also brought up by the applicant to put those in as a preventative measure.
I'm talking about the second one, the redundant one.
Yes,
We would recommend to.
we do recommend that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion?
No, that's helpful. Thank you for answering.
All right, all those in favor of approving the variance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we will vote on permit 23071. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Manager Maxwell. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Smarty. Any discussion?
No, I would think Lewis would agree. I think we have some good findings of fact, for instance, that we can't get, no, somebody else come in for a different kind of. It's not for his own personal hardship, but it's for the good of the community, I think, so.
Okay. All right, then, all those in favor of the permit 23071, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next on the agenda, item 11, action items, resolution 23043. Authorization to contract for engineering and design services for the 2023-2024 stormwater pond survey and maintenance. We have Tiffany Schaffler and Josh Wolf. That's Josh. Oh, there he is.
I'm here.
Maybe.
Hey, good evening, Chair Olson, Board of Managers. This evening we have the authorization to contract for engineering and design services for the 2023-2024 stormwater pond survey and maintenance. So tonight we'll take a look at the stormwater. We'll do a stormwater pond maintenance review. I'll give a brief on the RFP selection process and a tentative timeline for moving forward. So maybe you recognize this from the last meeting. We talked about stormwater ponds and the reasons why we construct them. And one of those reasons is sediment accumulation. And so we ask ourselves two questions. As it accumulates, how much sediment has accumulated? And then how has that reduced pond effectiveness? And MPCA best management practices dictate that when a pond has a reduced wet volume of 50%, that means when it's filled up to 50% of its originally constructed design volume, then it has to be dredged. So the district stormwater pond data analysis provided a sedimentation rate to determine which ponds are in need of maintenance, which allowed us to create that 20-year schedule that we talked about last meeting. And this year we have 2 ponds that are requiring maintenance. See there on the bottom left, we have Twin Lakes Park and the Nokomis Amelia Pond. And again, familiar graphic. Here we have the location of the ponds in the watershed with Twin Lake Park Pond at the top and the Nokomis Amelia Pond there in the bottom right corner of the screen with the red dots. So the timeline for the RFP on June 6th at the board meeting, the board authorized the release of the RFP. That RFP was open for submittals from July 7th to the 28th. And the district received proposals from 3 firms, Geosyntec Consultants, Moore Engineering Incorporated, and Stantec Consulting, and the board received copies of each of those proposals in a separate email. So the process that we used for review, we reviewed 3 areas of methodology, experience, and cost. We looked at the firm's understanding of the project, the completeness and specificity of their proposal, any innovation or creativity that was placed in the proposal, the experience of the company and the staff in terms of doing this type of work, and then the project scoping and cost effectiveness. So our recommendation, staff recommendation, is to authorize awarding a contract to Stantec Consultants. The determinations we used for this was that Stantec demonstrated a high level of technical and scientific expertise through a concise and well-written proposal with detailed knowledge of the site-specific challenges. Their proposal dedicated the most hours to the area of greatest risk, and their proposal had the most overall project hours while remaining the least costly proposal. So a tentative schedule for this. We have the kickoff meeting the week of August 21st. Then Stantec would begin to collect and analyze sediment samples. A technical report we'd see the week of the 23rd. Following that, project design, construction documents, and permitting. In September, we'd see bid document development and bid support. And then we look to construction beginning over the winter. So thank you for the presentation, and ask for any questions for the board.
Okay. Before that, is there a motion to approve resolution 23043?
So
Manager Sando, second from Manager Shamati. All right, discussion. It looks like there's no discussion.
Thank you for your thoroughness.
good job.
Yeah, very clear.
All right,
Looked at the reports and looked at the RFPs, and it was very clear that Stantec knew what they were doing. It's just the way they wrote it was very clear and cost less than 24 hours. That's amazing.
Yeah. It was a very well drafted proposal.
Yeah, very impressed. It's a no brainer on that one.
all right then, under that kind of pressure, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next
I
up,
will not make one note that I don't want to inherit progress that, but the budget item on that was concerning. However, I understand the whole PML budget is impacted by a completely different project, so it's totally out of whack. But typically, that's the type of thing in your memo where it says annual budget, annual to date, and the request. It makes me go, whoa, should we be approving this? Well, we have an external issue going on, which Deb did a great job, of course, talking about in her quarterly report. And so we understand why this an anomaly, and even though we're at 300% of the budget, this shouldn't be postponed. Some people would argue you should wait till 2024, but I think we understand why that specific budget's in the position it is. So
okay,
Yeah,
Thank you for moving it forward.
yeah, we'll actually be bringing a budget amendment to the board at the next meeting to address that situation.
Great.
So
Okay,
we'll see you then and discuss.
thank you. All right, are there any board inquiries, issues, or ideas from members who are present? We have silence, so we will move on to the next item, which is staff updates. We'll start with the first one, Minnehaha Preserve Boardwalk reconstruction with Tiffany.
Good evening, Chair Olson, managers. Usually James is offering an update on the administrative reports, but I figured since we were here seeking your approval on the pond contracts that I could do that myself tonight and hopefully have some good news to pass along. So as you've been hearing over the last few board meetings, we've been really trying to figure out these defective work categories, which there's 11 of, and what are the proposed solutions. So as of this week, 9 of those 11 solutions are to meet the specification of the contract requirement. So that's good news because that means they don't require any formal approval by SRF or the Watershed District. And then those remaining 2 out of the 11 solutions meet the design intent of the contract documents. However, they're proposing to use a different material and a larger bracket. So those will need formal review and approval by SRF and the Watershed District. But based on conversations with SRF, again, since they're meeting the design intent and the calculations are there, really no concerns. However, we want to make sure that we are in sync with the city of St. Louis Park and their permitting since they flagged some of these issues. So we're going to meet with them next week, gain their concurrence on JTS's proposed corrections, and then we'll be able to move forward. So getting to the actual corrections. Once we have concurrence, or assuming we have concurrence from St. Louis Park, we then plan in the next couple of weeks to get on site and actually do a test of JTS means and methods. So that means how are they actually going to implement the corrections? We want to do a test run of that because what they're proposing to do is to actually lift each section of the boardwalk up, and that will prevent the need for them to then disassemble a lot of the structure and essentially lift it up and do the corrections from underneath then. If that test is successful, then what that'll allow JTS to do is to order materials and begin to implement corrections. Right now, we know the lead time on the hardware, the hanger parts pieces that they need to order is about 2 to 3 weeks. If that lift test is not successful, then they will be required to disassemble to implement the corrections. So as for next steps, at the September 14th board meeting, staff may need to seek board approval on a contract change order for the project. However, I just want to clarify that change order would be to amend the project schedule and materials, and it would not be a contract price change in any way. So potentially at the next board meeting, we'll have an update on where we stand with St. Louis Park's concurrence and potentially have proceeded with that test means and methods and have a clearer timeline on actual implementation of the corrections.
That sounds a lot better than where we were a month ago. Thank you.
Yeah.
A quick
Question.
Question.
Who's gonna decide if the lift test is successful?
So that will be manager, Loftus managers. That will be between all of us. So we'll have the engineer out there, the city of St. Louis Park out there, and the Watershed District. So obviously, as owner, we want to make sure that we're not compromising the integrity of what's out there. So we've heard from SRF that they do this, that they don't see any issue, but obviously we just said, that's great to say that, but we just spent a significant amount of money constructing this. And we want to make sure that indeed implementing these corrections isn't going to cause more problems in the long run.
So you'll need consensus from 3 parties?
Correct.
Okay.
Still a warranty instead in effect, then even though there's these change orders that'll include.
Yeah, manager, Maxwell managers. So warranty comes in effect once you've reached substantial completion, which we technically have not. So then we'll have a year of warranty after we reach that substantial completion.
Here to see if something, in case it didn't work, even though we thought it was gonna work.
I know that the city of St. Louis Park you know, the folks from the city have been very involved in this, and I'm assuming that they continue to be involved at every step, so that you don't expect any surprises at the end when they, when they're supposed to give the, approval permit. So I'm presuming that that's happening.
Yeah, Manager Hadrada, you're presuming, right? We've kept them along, updated along the way. We've had them review a lot of our defective work notes. It's just to make sure that we're framing things that also capture their concerns. So, and we've heard from them, once corrections begin, they'd like to really have a strong presence on site. So we've been waiting to get to this kind of final milestone of having full clarity on the corrections. And then, like I said, we only need really their concurrence on these two solutions that are meeting the design intent, but not exactly what was in the original design. And then we'll move forward with them arm in arm, looking at that lift test, and actually, like I said, sharing inspections with them during the corrections.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
So it'll be a lift test party. They're invited.
Yes.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the administrator's report. Mr. Whisker.
Thank you, Chair Olson. Always my favorite part of the evening. So water level updates, I think last board meeting, we didn't cut out early, we skipped the administrator's report because we had a pretty lengthy closed session. So this is your first water level report in about a month, but it's still dry. We've received around 15.2 inches of precip this year. We're just above 5 inches below normal. All of Minnesota is now classified in drought. The watershed district, or Minnehaha Creek's watershed district, along with 34% of the state, is now in classified as severe drought. And as you might imagine, and we've reported before, the dry weather is causing a decline in water levels. So current lake level for Minnetonka is 928.26. That's 13.6 inches below the ordinary high water. So a really big gap there between what folks are accustomed to seeing and current water levels. And we're now 4 inches below the runout elevation of 928.6. And so since we're below runout, the dam is closed. We've reported on that closed earlier in July. Since it's been closed, the lake's fallen an additional 4 inches due to evaporation. The creek's running just below 1 CFS at Hiawatha Avenue, and we're not getting a ton of rain in the forecast, but in terms of forecast, there's about a 1/2 inch for this evening forecasted and a little bit between Sunday and Monday. So we continue to be in a pretty deep drought. I wanted to report in on some regional climate action policy. Manager Loftus recently asked me, I think after a meeting, about some legislation that had been passed last session that may have required the Met Council to address climate adaptation requirements and push requirements in local government or municipal comprehensive plans. And so I did ask Becky to take a look at that, and Minnesota statutes chapter 473 that provide framework for metropolitan governments were modified to incorporate climate mitigation and adaptation requirements into municipal comprehensive plans. Most of the new language that's been promulgated, which I kind of speculated on, is primarily focused on energy emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So on the mitigation side, there is some broad general language that guides them at council must specify how both climate mitigation and adaptation information must be incorporated into comprehensive plan content. So quite a bit of specificity from the legislature on mitigation and energy, very little, just a broad catch-all, but the Met Council needs to do something with comprehensive plans on adaptation. So we've reached out to Met Council. We've got, as you know, and it might imagine, a pretty strong working relationship with the water resources and comprehensive planning staff over there. Their advisory to our 2D model build. They're interested in doing something similar at the 7-county metro state. And so I think our plan is to continue engaging with them as we pursue our climate action revolving around extreme rainfall and flooding, and we begin working with our communities on their next generation plan, our next generation plan, as we track towards 2027 to see how we might help guide what the Met Council is ultimately going to be requiring or looking for in terms of adaptation to flooding. So I'm not sure if you have any questions on that, but I wanted to report in since you'd asked, and it was a really good question, and not a lot of specificity, but some room
Yeah.
to have some conversation and partnership with the Met Council.
Thanks for following up on that. I found it interesting that perhaps some of the requirements for, flooding and drought might come
Yeah.
through the Met Council to comp plans versus through water resource plans through us. Or what might be the right mix of
Yeah.
those two in the next 10-year, 20-year plans. So thanks for following up on that.
I think, leading into our climate action framework, we had done this governance scan and we looked at fed, state, municipal frameworks and who was doing what. And at that time, Minnesota still hadn't passed its climate action framework. The county was developing its, Met Council hadn't really
Yeah.
promulgated its own, and things have moved since then. But, I think it's important to keep doing these governance checks to see where everybody else is at. But just my read is if you look at how the committees are structured down in legislature, what they're talking about, where the funding's flowing into U of M for research or legislation that's being passed over to Met Council is really proportionally focused on greenhouse gas emissions. And then in this instance, as it relates to municipal comprehensive plans, how cities are addressing energy and emissions at a community scale. There's not a lot of specificity or emphasis at the different policy levels on adaptation. So I think it's the water resource community that's really kind of carrying that.
Yeah, well, I think your relationships and involvement with them on different committees and different projects could help influence or
Mhm.
relay the importance of that side of the climate
Yeah.
framework issue, and perhaps would get them jump started on that a little bit more.
It's definitely coming. I think it continues to be a signal, just, whether where everybody is and where we are.
Yeah.
And the watershed districts and water resource planners are probably leading the charge, obviously, on a lot of flooding and that level of climate adaptation regionally. I know as sort of another signal, the Pollution Control Agency Commissioner Katrina Kessler, who was Surface Water and Sewer Director for Minneapolis, the last couple sessions, they've made a big push and campaign for funding through PCA to help work on climate adaptation and specifically address flooding and those sorts of things. And they're in the ballpark of, $250,000 to $1 million that's being passed around the state to help outstate communities largely put together resilience and adaptation plans. So I think there's still kind of a long way to go in
Yeah.
terms of adaptation planning.
Thanks.
So, yeah. And we heard about this in committee, but I suppose for the record, Minnehaha Creek staff have applied for funding from Hennepin Community Works for trail connection at the 325 trailhead of the Cedar Regional Trail and the Southwest LRT connection, which you heard about in Operations Committee as part of the capital plan review. Sounds like a board action request has been developed by Hennepin County staff to award the project, which would be both projects, $200,000 in funding, and that's going to be in front of county committee next Tuesday and in front of the county board for approval end of August, around the 22nd. So we're trying to tease out with county staff if there's a specific one of those projects that they're going to dedicate the funds to, or if it's discretionary and how we'll allocate those. But good news either way. Thus concludes this exciting edition of your administrator's report. Unless there's questions.
All right, did Aladdis sign their extension?
Aladdis has processed their extension, and I believe, the proverbial checks in the mail for their $25,000 unilateral extension in the PSA. So yes. Any other questions?
Then the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.